Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome to the sixth episode of Ultra Modular Interaction and Inventory System in Unreal Engine 5.4. Last episode, we got consumables working. So if you enable or if you activate a hotbar slot and a consumable is in there, you'll consume it. It'll subtract it from the inventory and it'll affect your attributes. This episode, I'd like to get into our equipment. So if we activate a hotbar slot and an equipment item is in there, or I should say a handheld, we're going to classify it as handheld. If a handheld equipment item is in there, we'll equip it. And this may seem simple at first, but it's surprisingly complicated. And I've kind of done up a diagram that I'm going to walk through just to explain my thought process on this. But I wanted to say last episode was really long, and I want to try a new format, kind of going back to the 30-minute, hour-long episodes, and just try to get more out. Because it's way easier for me to get. I have a couple kids, so it's way easier for me to get 30 minutes free, an hour free to record versus something like 2 hours, 3 hours. So I'm gonna try to do more bite-sized stuff, but still pretty long, but more often. And I just wanted to remind everyone to check out the Discord. We have a growing community. There's tons of engagement in there, and check out the Patreon if you want any free project files. And without further ado, and also I'm working on a roadmap to where you can kind of see where the channel and all the series are headed, like the direction they're headed to. And I'm building in some functionality to where you can submit like requests or features you want to see covered. And for instance, maybe like what other people have submitted, and the more popular stuff, I can just, drag it into the approved section versus the suggestion section on the roadmap, and then you can kind of get an overview for where everything is headed, basically. Like all the series, I'll have where everything will eventually be, and like towards the end what it'll look like, and then I'll have another one for just the channel as a whole, and you guys can recommend like what series or what features or systems you'd like covered. So let's without further ado, let's jump into this. So I've kind of done up this diagram just to kind of show where my mind is going with this, and I'm more or less modeling it off of the indie game Valheim, which I think has a cool system for this because it's pretty seamless. There is no like equipment tab. You basically just equip equipment from your hotbar, but it has a really good algorithm for working out like what two things can be equipped at the same time, or it just has a lot of edge cases and stuff that it handles really elegantly. So this is my attempt to kind of break that down and design a similar system. So I totally recommend playing Valheim if you want to, like, just period. Valheim's great, but especially if you want to see where we're going with the equipment system. So if you can imagine, we have all this stuff right here. Now I'm separating equipment as in like armor or chest piece, stuff like that. I'm separating that I'm classifying that equipment. And then we have another group of equipment that I'm just calling handheld. So we can have like armor equipment and handheld equipment. Because you would think, like in my previous systems that I was building in my own prototypes, I just jumbled all these together. But they're very different. There's a lot of functionality that they will not share outside of just being, quote unquote, equipment. So if we look at this list, we have, just things that you can imagine would be in your hands, like in a game, a shield, a bow, a staff, one-handed sword, two-handed sword, and even a torch, and you can imagine more stuff like axe, pickaxe, stuff like that. And then you can kind of see some stuff will have like auxiliary things that it needs. Like, if we equip a shield, that's really all we need to know. But if we equip a bow, we kind of need to know what arrow, goes in there. And if we equip a magic staff or something like that, we'll need to know, what spell goes in there. So we kind of need the option in our system that we build to, implement these auxiliary slots. And basically, if you see right here, this is kind of breaking down all the scenarios that we would need this system to kind of cover. So for a staff or a bow, you can imagine that in your left hand, but you don't, I would say you don't want to like be wielding a bow in your left and a sword in your right. And if you're wielding a bow, you really don't need a shield. So I would say that if we're wielding a bow or a staff, we don't want to allow any other handheld in the other hand, but we kind of want an invisible slot for like spells and arrows, right? So that's kind of unique. That'd be unique because it's only these two things, or other things like it that would need that slot. These other ones wouldn't, right? So that makes our system a little harder. If we get down to how we would do a shield, we could just say, okay, that goes in our left hand. And right here, one-handed sword, spear, that goes in our right hand. Excuse me, that's pretty straightforward. But now we get down to this two-handed sword, and it technically is going to be equipped to our right hand, but we will need two hands to wield it, right? So it's technically a right-handed handheld, but we can't allow anything in the left hand because it's a two-handed sword, right? It takes up two hands. And then if we get into the torch is kind of just, like I said, this is how it works in Valheim. Like if you can have a shield and a sword, but if you break out a torch in your right hand, you can't. It'll pick up your shield. So I'm just adapting that. Like this is just a single right-handed, handheld, but we want to have cases that allow for unique rules that, hey, if it's a torch, we don't want to allow anything in the left hand. And for instance, you may not want to allow a water bucket and a shield or, anything like that. So what seems to be like a simple system, you can imagine like, hey, let's just build a system to equip items. Okay, that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You can see how it kind of gets crazy with edge cases and stuff like that. And not only this, I didn't even build this into it, but say we're trying to say in our hotbar slot, we have a shield. We press 1 and we equip the shield. The system also needs to know that if we press 1 again, while that hotbar slot is equipped on us, we mean to just de-equip it, like unequip it, versus trying to equip it again. And it's a lot different from, for instance, a consumable. If we just keep pressing 1, that means we're just trying to use it over and over and over. But if it's a handheld, if we, press 1, then press 1, then press 1, we are really trying to do two different things. We're trying to like use it and then de-use it almost. And so this is kind of what my thinking goes toward. This is kind of what my thinking is just like, it's something that seems simple at first, but it's actually kind of complicated. And this is kind of where my mind went. So we can build like a component that's like a handheld, manager component, and we can have slots that things can slot into. And this covers the first half of it, like where does each thing go? So in our data for our equipment, we can specify what slot it goes into, if it goes into the left hand and the right hand. Now that doesn't really do anything for unique cases like the two-handed sword, where it's going to go in the right hand, but we want to like not let anything in the left hand. And we can even have these accessory slots built in, so we can have 4 slots. And these accessory slots will not be necessarily tied to any hand. It'll just be a handheld manager, is what we need, and we need 4 slots. Now, we can kind of abstract this to objects. So this is basically a case of, it's kind of like a puzzle. Like we have puzzle pieces, and we can only use some in certain cases, and other ones block the use from other puzzle pieces. So basically the simplest and most elegant way I can think to do this is basically, in every one of our handheld equipments, we can just say, what slot does it go in? And if it blocks any slots. So for instance, if this was a greatsword, you could say it goes in your right hand, but it blocks your left hand. And so when we try to equip an item, we're going to get that data and we're going to say, okay, give me the hand that it goes in, and give me the hand that it blocks, if it blocks any, right? And this will be our currently occupied slots. So for instance, if we equip a greatsword, it's going to say it goes in the right, but it blocks the left hand, right? So our currently occupied slots would be like both of our hands. And then we try to equip a sword, it's going to check our currently occupied slots, and it's going to say, oh wait, your slots are all occupied. So if you're trying to equip the sword, I have to delete this object, which is our greatsword, and it's going to unequip the greatsword and then equip the sword. And then another thing is, which you probably wouldn't consider this. It took me many systems building something like this. It took me many times building a system like this to realize that this isn't optimal for anything other than the player. For instance, this is way overkill for an enemy AI with just one weapon, right? This is way overkill for, trees falling. If like you chop down a tree, it falls, it damages you. Something like this is not necessary. Wildlife, like if you have a deer or like a boar and it can attack you if you get too close or something like this is not necessary. But we'll end up, if you get deeper and deeper into using this system, you will eventually tie your damage and stuff. Like, say you have damage data on your equipment and damage data on your player, right? And so when you go to attack, you want to get what weapon you have in your hand, to add to your damage, or to calculate what damage you do. Like, the damage you do, it's safe to say the damage you do would be really dependent on what you have in your hand. And basically, you're going to tie up systems to where they rely on this handheld manager component, for instance, but then none of your other damaging items, like your AI, your wildlife, your physical damage stuff, will have this component. And then you're going to have to do a lot of workarounds in all your stuff that, hey, check if they have this handheld component. If not, and it's just a lot of mess. So what I've come up with basically is, when we equip an item, we will get the owning actor and the equipment. So it'll basically be a map of an actor and an array of actors. And we will basically have an equipment registry system that we put in a place that it can be accessed from anywhere in the game. So at any point, and really this is just an actor association registry, where we can associate an actor with a bunch of actors. And then we have all these other systems that, when they need to communicate and say you have an AI system, you're basically just going to attach a blueprint to that AI. But when you attach that blueprint to that AI, you can then call to this system and say, hey, this AI has this equipment registered. And so when you need to see how much data the AI is doing, you don't have to even worry about the handheld manager component or nothing like that. You just go into the equipment registry. And you can imagine how this is basically just subtracting all this and just making a middleman. And so when we build out our damage system and our collision trace system and all that, it won't have anything to do with this handheld manager component. It'll just worry about the equipment registry. And as far as the handheld manager is concerned, when we equip an item, we just need to report to the equipment registry that it's equipped, and then we'll have access to it. I hope that makes a little sense, but let's get into it. And I don't think we'll build the whole system this episode, but my plan is to at least get us equipping and reading whether, work out what hand the stuff should go in at least. And maybe if we pick up something and try to pick up something else, it'll block us from equipping something that is not allowed, if that makes sense. All right, so let's jump into that. I'm going to close this out. And I seem to have Steam open. I'm going to close that as well. Cool. And I just have OBS and Unreal Engine open. And let's get into it. So like I said, the first thing is going to be the handheld component, or the handheld manager component, but we will need to create some tags and blueprints, because we only have tools. If I'm not mistaken, let me see if I remember correctly from last time. We're going to our main folder, blueprints, game items. We have equipment, we have tools. Yeah, and we created a couple tools, but we want to create some of the weapons I just showed, or I guess some of the other stuff, not necessarily all the weapons. But if you follow along with last episode, you should have these gameplay tags. So let's just add on to them real quick. So with weapon, we'll say melee, we'll say sword, we'll say stone sword. So we're categorizing it as a weapon, a melee weapon, a sword, and a stone sword. And we're doing sword and then stone sword, so you can potentially have, iron sword or whatever. So in melee, we can say great sword, stone, great sword. There we go. And as far as the gameplay tags are concerned, you probably don't even need to know that it's a stone great sword. We probably could just end it at great sword, but just to be safe, we can just... it won't hurt to just add one more level. And in weapon, I'm just going to say range, bow, wooden bow. And if you remember back to my little graph, I had the little slots under the bow that was for the arrow, and the staff had something as well. And so in equipment, I'm just going to make one called accessory. That's what I'm going to call it. And now that is not for stuff like artifacts or other little things like that. This is specifically for stuff that equipment needs to use, like arrows, kind of an auxiliary equipment item that your main equipment handheld needs to call upon, basically. So we can say accessory arrow, and we'll say, kinetic arrow, which is just like a non-elemental arrow. Or actually, let's delete that. We can do that again. So equipment, accessory, arrow, and I'm going to just say wooden arrow. Cool. And then for our shield, we can just say wooden shield. Or like in Valheim, for instance, they have like a buckler shield and a tower shield. You know, a tower shield is like a huge shield. A buckler shield is like a more traditional shield. But we can just say shield. In ours, we can just have one version, like a wooden shield, for instance. So we have our equipment. We have our wooden arrow, our wooden shield. And we'll just create these while we're here. So pickaxe, and we'll say, I don't know, bone pickaxe. Say tool axe, stone axe. And let's see if so I actually did stone pickaxe, so I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to say tool, pickaxe, stone pickaxe, just because that's what I created the blueprint. I created the blueprint as a stone pickaxe. Cool. And we can actually say equipment. We can actually make a category for miscellaneous and say torch. So we have our wooden arrow, our wooden shield, our wooden bow, and our stone greatsword and stone sword. Cool. And we can go ahead and create these blueprints. So in our equipment folder, we can say blueprint class of type actor. We're going to say BP melee weapon. Or actually, yeah, because presumably there'll be a lot of different functionality in a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. And if you're not planning to overwrite, like most people will use inheritance, even if they don't plan on overwrite, like if our main base class has a method 1, say, or like a function number 1. And most people will create a child class for function number 2 and function number 3, even though they don't plan to overwrite the function number 1 in the child classes. And I try not to do that. I try to only make child classes if I'm going to implement or override or make use of at all the parent function. So I'm going to just say melee weapon base, and then we create a child class of that, which will say BP melee weapon sword base. And we're creating a sword base because we may have different types of swords. Obviously, if you're doing like a survival game or something, you may have a stone sword, an iron sword, whatever. So we'll say stone sword. So we have we have melee weapon base, melee weapon sword base, and melee weapon sword, stone sword. I'm going to put them in a folder called swords. And actually, so we can get our melee weapon base and drag it into our equipment folder so it pops out one level. And then we can create a child off that for our great sword. So melee weapon, great sword base, create a child of that. Melee weapon, great sword, stone, great sword. And I'm going to create a folder for great swords. And we create a fresh actor class and say range weapon base, say range weapon, make a child of that and call it range weapon bow base. And again, we're creating a bow base because we may have a wooden bow or, you know, many different variations, and create a child of that of range weapon bow, wooden bow. And so that'll be our bows. And then we'll create another fresh actor. We'll say BP shield base, create a child, BP shield wooden shield. And we'll make a folder for shields. And do another fresh actor class and say BP. It's kind of long, equipment accessory, so I'm just going to say equip assess base. And that's going to be for stuff like arrows or whatever. And so equip assess arrow base. And I'm going to make a child of that and say wooden arrow. And make a folder for accessories. And while we're at it, we might as well make our miscellaneous stuff. So equip BP, a fresh actor of equip. I'm just going to call it equip miss for equipment miscellaneous. I'm going to say base, create a child of that and just say equip miscellaneous outside torch. and a new folder for miscellaneous. All right, cool. So before we go any further, we should probably make a data asset for our equipment. So we have our assets, we have our item data, and we have our consumable data. And if you remember, our item data is kind of like, like the main definition of what something is. But within our item data, we have our other data, we have auxiliary data for all the other types of data that that item could be. So first thing we're going to do is go into Blueprint class, and let's create a primary data asset. And we're going to call it DA equipment. Actually, let's be more specific. Let's call it DA for data asset, and we'll say handheld. There we go. And then in our data assets folder, we can create a folder for handheld data. Cool. And then we can create a miscellaneous data asset of type DA handheld, and we'll say DA, I'm just going to say DAHH for handheld, and we can say stone sword. I'm going to duplicate it, say stone greatsword. And I think that'll be it for now, just those two, because doing these two will demonstrate if our handheld functionality is working. For instance, if we have a sword and, oh, we may want one, let's duplicate that again and just do a bow. So let's say TAHH underscore wooden bow. So we have a bow, a stone sword, and a great sword. Now, if we go into our primaries and we have that handheld data asset, this will be all the data associated with any equipment we may have. So in our game item data asset, we can just add the handheld data as a data asset, for instance, handheld data, and we can throw that in our auxiliary data category. And then we have our handheld data. This is all the data that any handhelds may, use, for instance. Before we go any further, we can go into our main folder, go into blueprints, data, and we will need to create an enum for our slots. So we can say E underscore handheld slots. And we'll create a couple entries in this. Remember, I always start it with a backslash, and we can say right hand slot, or let's say right hand. Yeah, we can make it all spaced out. Right hand slot, a left hand slot. We can say right hand accessory slot and left hand accessory slot. Cool. So we have those, and we can now create those variables. So I'm going to create one for, let's say equip slot. What was it? Handheld slots. Right, so it's going to see, and I'm going to duplicate that and say blocked handheld slots. I'm going to say slots, and I'm going to make that an array. So if you equip something, it can block multiple slots, just in case. And this system will seem like it's kind of like it'll only work for something like a survival game, with these kind of slots. But even for like a Call of Duty type game with a primary and secondary weapon, you could take a similar approach to this and get similar results. I'm going to rename this other slot one to active equip slots, I guess. But I just want to make the active slot a single instance, and the blocked slot we will make a array. And so if we go into our DA, our game item primary, you'll see that we have a mesh in here. We define an item mesh, but it's a static mesh. And when we're using equipment and it's something that we may want to animate, or we may want to like do damage and stuff like that, usually it's a better idea to do a skeletal mesh instead of a static mesh. So we'll say, now if you're using static meshes in your game, you can just kind of disregard this and just use the static mesh from the game item. But I'm going to say handheld skeletal mesh. And then I'm going to get another variable of type name and say let's say equip socket. I'm going to duplicate that and say stow socket. And I've had some animations in the past where, like, it'd be like a right hand weapon, but temporarily the equipment would switch hands. So I'm just going to make a third socket and call it offhand socket, just in case at some point maybe your animation has the equipment switching hands and then going back. You can kind of define what the other sockets are. So we have that. Cool. So I think that's it for now. We have the slot it goes in, and we have the equipment name, the socket that it goes in, and we have what mesh it is. Now, for the actual meshes, we are going to use this Infinity Blade weapons pack from the marketplace. It's free. It's made by Epic. It's been on there for a long time. And it has many, many different types of, mostly like swords, axes, stuff like that. I couldn't find any shields or anything, but we can kind of use our imagination, even if we have to, make our shield a sword or something. We can just kind of know if it's working or not, and you can get shields from wherever you'd like. But we're going to use this. I'm going to try to include this in the description as a download because I've heard recently that it's no longer available on the marketplace for some reason. And I think it's just a bug with the new fab system. So for those who don't have it already downloaded, because this is kind of the first thing people usually download with Unreal Engine, or at least it used to be, because it was available and free for so long and such high quality. But I'm going to link it I'm going to try to link it in a Google Drive link with this video. So just check the description and you should be able to download it and then just migrate that stuff over to this project. Or like I said, you can just use whatever, skeletal meshes or whatever meshes you have or have access to. So if we go into our blueprints, data, assets, we have handheld data, item data, and consumable data. So in our handheld data, now we have all this, right? So look, that's a finger. That's funny. So I'm just going to try to go into the Infinity Blade pack and just kind of pick some that I will remember. So let's just do these. So Black Knight and Dragon Sword. Cool. So Black Knight. Cool. And so this is our Great Sword. So I'm just going to say Great Sword equip. Great Sword equip socket. Great Sword stow socket. And Great Sword offhand socket. All one word, all lowercase, because we will need to copy or remember these. And for our active equipment slot, we're going to say right hand, but then we're going to block the left hand. And we can even block the right hand and left hand accessory just as an example of how you would do this. But for our purposes, we won't really be messing with the accessory slots this episode. So if we go back to our stone sword, what was the Infinity Blade? I said something. I said swords. It was Black Knight and Dragon Sword, I think. Yeah. So let's say dragon. Yeah, Dragon Sword. And this is our regular sword. So we can say sword equip socket, sword stow socket, and sword offhand socket. And we want the right hand slot, and we do not want to block any slots because the blocked handheld slots we will treat as additional slots to block. I should highlight that. Like, we will take into account the active slots when we calculate what slots are active or not. So we don't need to, like, if this is just a right-handed weapon, we don't need to block the right-hand slot. It's going to block itself because something is in that slot, if that makes any sense. So we have our handheld data assets filled out. Now we just need to go to our item data. We can create a folder for handhelds because we're going to go to miscellaneous, create a data asset, and this will be the item data for our handhelds. So we'll say DA stone sword, duplicate that, and say DA great sword. So stone sword, we probably need to add our names, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So if we go to blueprints, data, enumerations, we have external item name. We can just make a couple spots for that and say stone sword, stone great sword. And I'm just going to add the other ones while we're here. So stone axe, stone pickaxe. We had torch. We had wooden bow. Wooden arrow. And wooden shield. I think that's about it. And we have our DA stone sword. So here we can get our stone sword. Not consumable. We have this right here, which we have weapon, melee, sword, stone sword. Item class is going to be our sword, stone sword. Yep. And there we go. So, and we don't really need a mesh because it's going to it's going to use its handheld data for that. Let's see if we have a sword icon. Nope. I'm just going to, let's see, food. Nope. Just trying to find yeah, I'm just going to use a banana, but I am going to put the max stack size to 1. And okay, the overlay, oh, the item name is down here. We can say stone sword, stackable. I'm going to uncheck it because I don't want my handhelds to be stackable. And then right here, we have our auxiliary data. We're going to go handheld stone sword. And that's going to be the data associated with the stone sword. Or I should say the handheld data associated with the stone sword. This might be kind of confusing as far as the data asset setup. But the only other way I found to do this efficiently is to make child assets of the item data. But then you'd have to cast, and it's usually a bad idea to cast if avoidable. And I feel like this is a way that big studios or like serious developers would do it, is they would have a primary data asset with all the other data associated with stuff. And doing it this way, you know, every item is not necessarily a handheld, doesn't have the data associated with a handheld. Like if an item is just an item, it doesn't have to worry about having the extra data for handhelds and consumables, because only the handhelds are going to have the extra handheld data, and only the consumables are going to have the consumable data and not the handheld data, you see. So because if you just did one data asset, you could have 500 variables at the end of it, and then every single item would have all those 500 variables. This way we kind of separate it, and we don't have all this, you know, just extra variables. So in our item data, remember, inside the item data is our item data for different things. And then we have handheld data and consumable data that links to the item data. So we need to fill out our greatsword item data, which is going to be a stone greatsword. Oops. And then max stack size, I'm going to put to 1. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to make it not stackable, and then make sure I put the right handheld data for those two. And then I'm going to go into our item definitions, and I'm going to create 2 new rows. Going to get our stone greatsword, and oh, it looks like I misnamed those. So I'm going to go into our data assets, item data handheld, and I called it item data stone greatsword. I'm going to call the other one item data stone sword. That way it maintains the naming convention of all the other stuff. So item data stone sword. I'm going to copy this and name it like that, just like I demonstrated in the last episode. I'm going to get the stone greatsword and do that right there, and then copy the gameplay tag and put it as the name. Cool. Oops. So, oh no, did I do no, this is supposed to be the stone sword. Yeah. So just make sure you're doing the names and stuff right. So the second one is our greatsword. Yep. Copy, paste it. Cool. And so let's go quickly into our blueprints, game items. Oh, I'm going to drag our melee weapons into our equipment. That should be good for now. Yeah, and this is, oh, and our swords can go in our melee weapons. Hold on. Melee weapons, swords. Okay, so what is our swords doing right there? Oh, I guess I might have accidentally made that previously. I'm going to delete the swords because it looks like I made these last episode and just didn't notice them. If you made these last episode, you don't have to change anything. Just make sure, just try to have one set of stuff. So let's see. I think I'm just going to delete these great swords too. Yes, delete it. And so that way I have a melee weapons folder with the swords and great swords. Yeah, then tools, shields. Okay, cool. But I think I associate in our data table, I think I associated the other, or not our data table, our, what was it? Item data, handheld. Yeah, and these I think I need to pick another class. So stone, need to pick the other class. There we go. And then stone sword. Cool. Just making sure. Melee weapon, great sword, stone great sword, melee weapon, stone sword. Cool. And so if we go into our blueprints, game items, equipment, melee weapons, melee weapon base. There we go. We can add a skeletal mesh component, and we'll say melee weapon scale mesh. And we'll need to get our tag. The same thing we've done in every one, really. So we'll get the tag, get the quantity, get the can interact. And don't forget to implement the interface. So the game item interface, and then fill out these. So set quantity, we're just going to set the quantity. Can interact, we're going to can interact, and make sure to set that as yes by default. If on interaction event we aren't implementing really, right here we can say set overlay material, and we can get a select and drag the activate in there. And if we're activating it, we want to get item or get definition BPS. What was it? Get item. Oh, here we go, by row name. This is the function that we made last time that uses the row name, and we can make a branch just in case to not run into any errors. True, and for true, we're going to say get overlay material, and false, we want nothing. And then if we get item data, that interface function, we just want to fill it out with this stuff. So quantity and the tag. Cool. And let's go into our blueprint function library, which is in blueprints, game, my blueprint function library. We can say get handheld data by row name, for instance. We can get our get item data by row name and drag these two in there. So the row name and the world context. Can do this. And we basically are just going to, this is just to shorten, make this function a little shorter and just optimize it slightly. So we're just going to do this right here. Boom. Boom. I'm going to bring the Boolean to the top. And I'm just going to pass the item data too, because I can see some scenarios where we need both. And that's going to be get handheld data by row name. I'm going to check it to pure. And I just realized we didn't make a game state. We will need a game state. So if we go to, in our game folder, we can just make a game state, call it BP_my game state. And then in our game mode base, let's change the game state to my game state and make sure it works. And it doesn't because I created the wrong kind. So we'll delete that one. And we'll go into our game folder again, go to blueprints, and there's two kinds. So I created this one right here. I guess we need to create the game state base. Call it BP my game state base. Oops, I deleted something else. Looks like I deleted our game mode, guys. Oh, okay, I'm gonna create another game mode because I just deleted it on accident. I'm gonna say my game mode. I'm going to delete the previous game state like I meant to do. And in my game mode, I'm going to choose my player controller In the game state, I'm going to choose my game state base, and I'm going to make our third person character the default pawn. I'm going to X that out. I'm going to make sure it works. Nope. Oh, I need to go into project settings and put our game mode. Let's see if that works. Yay. Okay, cool. And so so we have our game mode, and we have our components. Let's create our components. So blueprint class actor will say handheld manager component, and I'm going to duplicate that and say equipment registry component. And I'm going to go into our game state, my game state base, and I'm going to add the equipment registry component to the game state base. And that way, let me see, from anywhere, we can just type get game state and we'll have access to that component. So let's make a blueprint function in our function library for get equipment registry component. And we'll say get game state. I'm going to call that world context, and we'll say get component by class. Equipment registry, we'll say is valid. And I'll put a return node. And I'm going to say found question mark. Or let's put valid actually. Valid question mark. And equipment registry. Misspelled component. I'm going to make that pure. And that way we can have access to it from anywhere. I'm going to go into our melee weapon base, go into the construction script, going to get, what was it? Handheld, data by row name, get tag name off the tag, plug that in, and the world context is going to be referenced to self. That should work. And if we have found the data, we will handheld data, get skeletal mesh. We'll drag this out, set skeletal mesh asset. Boom, boom. There we go. And if we go to viewport, let's go into our more specific, not our base class actually, and we can make this an abstract class. So in our class settings, generate abstract class, because this is our melee weapon base, and we really don't want to ever be able to drag that in there. Same thing with this sword base. So sword base, we can go to class settings, generate abstract class, and for the tag we can say, what are you? A stone sword. There we go. Cool. And we have our stone sword. As soon as we change the tag, it should give us the stone sword, and we can drag it in there like that. Cool. And we want to make sure, let's go into our equipment, melee weapons, melee weapon base, and our equipment right here, we want to, let's go to custom, and we want to block the interact, say collision enabled, boom. And I'm seeing here, no, that doesn't look like it. Let's see. I wonder why it said no collision by default. Looks like, let's see if it has a physics asset. I'm not seeing it, but we'll just see. So we want, usually we'll do our update physics. So update physics, update item physics. And we want to simulate it, and the primitive component is this one right here. And you see it, see how it doesn't fall? It just stays there. Skeletal meshes have something called physics assets that they use to do to operate physics. So let's go find this mesh, which is this one, I believe. This one right here. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to go into the Infinity Blade weapons and say PA or physics. So it doesn't look like they have any physics assets. So we will need to go to the find. You can get to the data asset and then just hit this folder with a circle magnifying glass thing, and it'll bring up the skeletal mesh that it is. I didn't mean to open it like that. You can right click it and do create physics assets, create and assign, create asset, boom. And now if we hit play, there we go. It has physics. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, which is, well, there was this one, this Black Knight one, or whichever one you decided to use. I'm going to say physics asset, create and assign, create asset. I'm going to X both of these out real quick. Hit save all. And we're going to go into our blueprints, game items, equipment, melee weapons, great swords, and get our great stone sword. Our stone great sword, sorry. And I'm going to call it great stone sword. Or stone great sword, sorry. And there it is. I'm going to make sure cool. And you can see there it's highlighting because I'm within range. Awesome. I'm going to get rid of the great stone sword, and just to make things a little easier, actually, I'm going to create a new level. So I'm going to go new level. I'm going to make it a basic level. I'm going to go file, save current level as. I like to do this for different kinds of testing and stuff like that. I'm going to say equipment testing. Cool. And we can go into our components, our handheld manager, and let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is get a function going for, I'm going to say spawn. No, I'm going to say, first thing we're going to do is validate the slot, but I want to make one so we can call it on the interaction manager. So spawn and, or let's say spawn and attach handheld. There we go. Spawn and attach handheld. And we should just need the tag. Cool. And I'm going to go into our components, interaction manager, and we have try interact with item, where we do all our checks to see what we're doing. And basically we are going to, no, I'm mistaken, because when we pick it up, we still want the same thing to happen. This is only when we activate a hotbar slot. So let's make our function. So I'm going to create another function called validate slot. I'm going to create an input for handheld slot and say slot to validate. I'm going to make it a pure function. I'm going to create our handheld slot map. So we'll say this is handheld slot map, because we're going to take that handheld slots and make it a map. And this is going to, the key is going to be the handheld slot, and the value is going to be an actor. And then from the beginning, we're just going to create all the slots we need. So the left hand, the right hand, and then the accessory slots. And a map is really good for something like this because it will never allow you to have duplicates of any key value. So even if we tried, you see I get an error message because I can't have two right hand slots, no matter what is in the second value. So when we validate a slot, we want to find it. And we not only want to make sure it exists in our map, but that the actor itself is valid as well. So basically this will return false if this actor right here is set to none. And we'll say valid, and then we will get this actor reference and put it in there for actor ref. Or let's say actor in slot ref. There we go. Cool. And let's see. So basically you have to think of it like we are, this has nothing to do with stowing items or stowing equipment. This is strictly about equipping equipment. So anything that's in this slot is equipped on your character. And before I forget, let's go into our third-person character blueprints, third-person character. We're going to need to get to this mesh and go to this skeletal mesh asset and create some sockets to equip our stuff on. So we're going to find the hand right and right click it and add socket. And we had sword equip socket. And I'm going to add another one for great sword equip socket. And just while we're at it, I'm going to find maybe spine 4 and add our stow socket. So great sword stow socket. Yeah. And then add another one for sword stow socket, maybe. There we go. And on our hand right, we have our sword equip and great sword equip. I'm going to remember which one is our sword, which is the dragon sword. I'm going to go back to the skeleton. I'm going to right click on our socket and add preview. And I believe that was the dragon sword. And we can say, I'm just going to make sure that I have the sword equip socket selected. And I'm just going to kind of make it seem like he would be holding it to some extent. Same thing with the great sword. So which one was that? That was the Black Knight sword. Now we won't get into animations in this episode. We're just going to kind of validate it through print strings and stuff that it's working, but we will be attaching them to the player. So we need this. If you don't have the socket if you don't have this socket created on the character, when it goes to add it to it, it will just create it and add it to its feet. So if you ever notice that you're trying to spawn and attach an item to a character and it's like spawning at their feet, that is why. That is indicative that you do not have a socket that goes. So sword, in the spine 04, we have our sword sword stow socket. I'm just going to twist it around, and because, this would be like equipped to their back. And this is just a preview item. This is not going to really be on our character in game. This is just a preview. So we can like line it all up and stuff. And you can move these sockets kind of freely, but I'm just going to kind of put it, on their back, on his back. I'm going to add the other preview for the Black Knight one. And, this, you can fine tune this to your liking, but I'm just going to kind of approximate it for now. And now, our handheld slot map won't have anything to do with, like, it won't know the difference between stowed and equipped and stuff like that. But we will, just like in Valheim, like if we have something equipped and we press like the T button or something, it will, stow everything that we have. That's why we're doing the stow sockets. Cool. And if we go into, I'm just going to, if you right click on one of these tabs, you can say close tabs to the right. I'm just going to close everything, go to our handheld manager, and we have our validate slot and spawn and attach handheld. So we can get handheld data by row name. We will get the tag name, and the world context is going to be self. And we can actually, on event begin play in this component, we need to cast to our character. So I'm going to show you a different way. So typically you can get the owner of this component and cast to character. Let's see. Cast to character and then save this character to get a reference to your character or the character that's using it. But I'm just going to show you a different way to do that, which is going to be create a function or a custom event, and we'll say initialize handheld manager, and I'm going to put an input as type character, and we'll say owning character. Then I'm going to go to our third person blueprints character. Now in our handheld manager, you notice we don't have anything that is a construction script. A construction script fires in the editor. So we don't have the power in this component to do stuff before we press play. So we can, the soonest we can do something is on event begin play, but the character has a construction script, which means we can run stuff, in the editor before we press play. So if we add the handheld component to our character, then we grab this component and we're in the construction script. It's kind of a workaround to do stuff in the construction script within a component. And so I'm calling this function on the component just to get a reference to the character that owns it, if you see. Now, that will probably save like, you know, 1/100th of a millisecond by doing that instead of casting. Typically, it's kind of, you know, either or, it doesn't really matter, but that's just a way to, I'm going to comment this, that's just a different way to do it, to get variables from, you know, you can also use a interface to get variables from your character from a component, or, you know, you can do something like this. So we have our own character, and we can drag out a character and get mesh, because mesh just kind of comes with the character class. We can say owning character mesh. I'm going to stretch this out a little. There we go. And spawn and attach. So we have, presumably we found this data by the tag. And we will spawn actor from class. Oops. On the true branch. And we need to split this transfer or you'll get an error. And the owner, I'm going to just make the owning character actually. Oh yeah, because we're not specifying a class. So we'll say get class. Make sure you don't get this utilities get class. You get the get item class that we define in the data asset. And this is the actor that's going to spawn. So we want to drag off of that and say attach actor to component. The component that we want to attach it to is the owning character mesh that we got from this right here. Oops, sorry, this right here. And this will attach the actor that we're spawning, which is the actor associated with that equipment or that handheld, and it will attach it to this socket. Well, we know what socket that goes to it. It's going to be get equip socket. And that's the socket that we defined in the data asset and created on the character. And it's really important that you change all these to snap to target. And then we will get our handheld slot map and say add. And we will get slot. So what was it? Get active equip slot. And we're going to drag that in. And then this is the reference to the actor that we're spawning. And we just drag that in as well. I'm going to just make that look a little neater. And we have our what was it, ability system migrated to this project, and we have states for consuming and interacting, but I'm going to make a state main unarmed and a state main armed sword. And then we can say armed greatsword. And for instance, if we go into our blueprints data, primaries, we go into our handheld data, we can create a variable of type gameplay tag container and say tags granted on equipped, or tags granted on equip. And just to start, we can say, for instance, you know, main armed sword just as a default value. And in our handheld manager, on event begin play, we can simply get the owner of this component, which is, you know, whoever owns this component, in this case, our player character. Can say, or actually we can just do our get bpass get, yeah, there we go. And then the actor we're going to pass in is the owner of this component. So get owner. And we can just say that right there. So I'm going to actually just control X that and go into spawn and attach and get our gameplay tag manager component and say add tags. Quantity to add is 1. And the tags we're going to add are get tags granted on equip. Boom. And that's going to help us define the state of our character, which, remember, we haven't really taken advantage of it yet, but our gameplay tag manager already has the functionality to communicate with our animation blueprint. So when these tags granted on equip, which we just defined as, armed sword, we pass that into our gameplay tag manager, which passes that to our animation blueprint, which helps us display the right animation. So let's create a function for removes from slot. Or what was it? Handheld slots. So we'll say slot to remove from as an input, and then we will simply validate the slot. And we have this actor, so old actor, our actor in slot. We're going to save that as a local variable because when we destroy it, we will lose access to it unless we save it as a local variable. So we will get this, our map, and say remove. And we want to remove the one in this slot, which I'm going to actually disconnect that and say get slot to remove from. And actually we need to take care of our blocked slots. So let's make an array of type e_handheld slots. And we will say blocked slots, or let's say occupied or blocked. Oh no, we just need the block slots, And we will say, is slot blocked or occupied? Question mark. Slot to check. Okay, so first thing we'll do is validate it. And then we can make one for is slot blocked? Question mark. And it's going to take in a handheld slot input. So slot to check again. And we basically want to just see if this contains this slot. So wait, okay, so actually let's say is slot not blocked. And we can do contains and then not. And then drag that in. And if it's not blocked, and we can make that pure. And we can go into is slot blocked or occupied and drag that in. And so we're going to do these checks. We have to make sure it's valid and it is not blocked. And then we can connect this to the output, the return node, and say not blocked or occupied. Create a pure. And so basically these couples of functions, validate slot, is slot blocked or occupied, is slot not blocked, is just, variations of seeing if the slot is occupied or not. And so we have all that. So we go into remove slot. We're checking if the slot is valid, and then we are removing it from our map. But then we want to get bpass actor system. We will get the owner, which is the owner of this component, pass that in. And we have our gameplay tag, and we can say remove tags. And the tags we want to remove, remember we have our interface function that all the classes implement. So we can get handheld definition by row name. We can get the tag name, make the world context our self. And we just need this handheld data to say get tags granted on equip, because we want to remove all of those right here. If that makes any sense. And basically, if all that has succeeded, we will get our local variable and destroy it. That's what we'll do when we remove an item. Or actually, we need to do one more thing before we do that, which is remove this item from our blocked slots array. Because if it's, removed, it's no longer Aha. So we will need to create a function for that. Remove slots from blocked. And we will make an input for an array of slots to unblock. Oops, slots to unblock. And we will basically, no, we need to do a for each loop on this array that is passed in. And we need to basically remove the item from there. So we will loop through all the slots that we want to unblock and just remove it from our block slots. And let's say add slots to blocked. Because we'll need to do the same thing, slots to block. Blocked slots. So we will for each loop off on all the slots to block. Then we want to add to our blocked ones and just add. There we go. And so when we remove from slot, we will remove slots from blocked, which we have here. Get blocked handheld slots, boom. And then we will destroy the actor. Cool. And so think about it, when we spawn and attach an item, the first thing we have to see is the slot. We have to get the slot first of all, so let's drag this back a little bit. And we need to do this after this branch. I dragged it way too far back. So we need to get the slot and check if it's blocked or occupied. And let's do this actually. So let's go into our blueprint just to make this a little cleaner. Let's go into our blueprints, data, enums. We will say blueprint, e underscore handheld, or let's say slot status. And I'm going to create a backslash for the first one and say occupied, blocked, and open. And then we can just do that right here. So we will make a output of type slot status, and this is blocked or occupied slot status. And we can call this get slot status instead of is blocked or occupied. So when we validate it, this is only going to return true if something is in it, which means it is occupied, right? So we can say, we can do a sequence and check if it's occupied. True, it's occupied. And then for the second one, or the then one on the sequence, we can say, we actually want this to be not. If it's not, if it's not blocked, then it's blocked. And then if this returns false, we'll say open. So if it's going to go through this and it's going to exit, it's never going to do this right here. If this returns true, it's just going to exit the function and say it's occupied. And so this is what we want to get. We want to get the slot status of, so this is the slot, this is the equip stat, the equip slot of the incoming item, basically the incoming handheld. And we have different things we want to do if it's occupied, if it's blocked, if it's open. If it's open, we just want to go straight to here. We can put a return node for this function and say success. And so if it's blocked, we're just going to do that. We can't equip it, you know? Now, if it's occupied, think about it. If it's occupied, we may want to unequip it, right? Because if something's already in that slot, we need to check if it has the same tag. And if it does, we're trying to unequip it. So let's say check check slot by tag. Let's try that. So gameplay tag, and then we'll say slot, like what slot are we checking for, which is what handheld slot we called it. Slot to check. And so we will validate the slot first. And if it's valid, we need to pull off that actor ref and get item data. And then we will pull off a tag, say matches tag, get tag. And we'll see if these two match, which, you know, is this tag right here, which is this. And we can just return node. Check slot tag by tag, and we'll say slot tag, or let's say tag in slot match, question mark. And that's going to be whatever this is. So if the slots match, that means we're trying to unequip something, and we need to unequip it first, or in other words, remove it, remove from slot. Because when we remove it, we remove the slots. And I'm trying to see where we remove right here. And this is a little unclear. I'm just going to get this local variable and put it right there to make it a little more clear. So we're removing the tags, and then we're removing the slots, and then we're destroying the actor when we remove it. So if it's occupied, we first need to check if it is the same or different kind of, like if this tag that's coming in to our handheld manager is the same as the one that is in the slot, that means we're trying to unequip it. So the slot we want to check is this one. And so if they match, then we are trying to, it's safe to assume we're trying to remove from slot. We're trying to unequip something. And if not, it just needs to come back here and spawn the class and stuff. And the slot to remove from is going to be that right there. Boom. And I guess really, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's either way. Well, if they match, we want to do that and not. But if they don't match, then we want to do this and then spawn another one if they don't match. Because if they do match and it's occupied, we're just trying to destroy that item basically. But if they don't match and it's occupied, we're trying to destroy that item and equip something else basically. And I think that'll do it. Now, if it's blocked, we don't want to do anything, right? And we need to add slots to blocked. And we will just, before we do any of that, let's just get this data and say get. So we'll get that and we'll just see. Or there's actually a function for that. Is not empty. And I'll just straighten that up, and then I'm going to drag it all the way to the end. And if it is not empty, then we will continue and add those. And then I will do a return node for success. Boom. And we'll give that a shot. Now, that was probably a, let's change this to try spawn and attach handheld. Now, I know that was probably a complicated little function, but hopefully it makes a little sense. I'm going to just try to neaten this up just a little bit. And you have to imagine all this getting called when we try to activate the hotbar. Remember, we're trying to activate a hotbar slot. All it's doing is checking for the data. And we can get a return node and put it for false right here. It'll just return nothing. So it's getting our item data that we have in our data table. And then depending on what the status of the slot is, that is when we will decide what to do. If it's occupied, we really need to know if it's occupied by the item that we are trying to activate in the hotbar slot, because if it is, we're trying to do something totally different. We just want to remove it. But if it's not, if it's open, we can just equip it. And if it's occupied by a different item, then we're trying to equip that item, basically. We're trying to equip the new item and unequip the old item. So we unequip the old item and then equip the new one. So let's give that a shot. So in our third person character, event graph, no input graph, sorry. We have our hotbar slots. And right here, if it's a food or a meal or whatever, we have that. But let's do it if it's a weapon. So, oh, I see, we're activating the ability. So basically, if it's a weapon, we just want to try spawn and attach handheld. And then the tag is going to be this item tag that we're getting over here. Boom, cool. And remember, this is our new level. So I'm going to go into blueprints, game items, equipment, melee, swords, get our stone sword, drop it in there. Wherever it is, there it is. And then I'm going to try to interact with it. Boom. I got our banana, or our sword, sorry. I'm going to press 1. Let's make sure that is going through. So in our input graph, we are doing this right here. Boom. And what are we checking right here? So let's see. Item material, item. What? Oh, this isn't, I didn't even plug that one up. That's not good. So tag 1 is that. Tag 2 is a weapon. Yeah, cool. That should be that. Let's try it again. Boom. We got our sword. We interact with it. It's a banana icon, but it's really a sword. I press 1 and it equips, but it falls. That's a good thing to know. You see it equipped to me, but then it fell loose because we're still simulating physics. So let's fix that real quick. I'm just going to make sure. Let's go into our blueprint data. Let's make sure, first of all, our handheld data, stone sword. Let's double check what we said. Sword, equip, socket. And then we can go into our third person character, go into our mesh. It's this one. And let's make sure we got a sword, equip, socket. So sword, equip, socket. Cool. And then we can make a blueprint interface. We already have an interface right there. So we can, this is the ones that all our game items inherit from. So we can say update physics. Can say primitive component. And then we will make a Boolean. If you remember, we have a blueprint function in our function library just like this. So simulate physics. Because basically, in our handheld manager, when we spawn this item, the first thing we're going to do is disable the physics. So we're going to drag this out. And when we spawn the item, we're going to get it from here. That's the actor we're spawning. And we're just going to say, oops, not update tags, but update physics. And actually, we don't even need that primitive component. Where is it? Yeah, we just need to know whether to update physics or not. And we will say, no, we do not want to simulate physics. We will connect that. And then in our blueprints, game items, equipment, melee weapons, and our melee weapon base, we have this interface, and there it is, update physics. And we want to set simulate physics. And let me double check what this is setting it to. Okay, actually this isn't good that we're doing no collision right here. I'm glad I caught that. So let's go into collision. and I believe it's block all dynamic that we wanted to do. So in our function library and our update item physics, so either way, we're going to want collision enabled, but we'll say query only, no physics, and we'll say block all dynamic. And actually, let's call it my block all dynamic. There we go. And I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go into our collision settings. I'm going to create a new preset, which will make it world dynamic. We'll make the collision enabled to query only, and we'll call it my block all dynamic. And we will basically block visibility, ignore the camera, block interactable, and then block everything else. So it's basically the same thing as block all, but it looks like they do both, collision enabled for both. Not so collision enabled query and physics, because it's this block all dynamics. It's just this collision profile, but I'm making one that actually blocks our interactable channel. And actually, let's edit this and say my block all interactable. And then we'll make another one. Let's see if we can duplicate it maybe. Nope. Okay, so we'll say my block all dynamic. So we will do what we did, but we will actually ignore, and we don't even need this actually. We can just, so my block all interactable has the interactable channel blocked, but if not, we will use this block all dynamic. So let's go into our BP melee weapon, BP melee weapon, and actually let's go into our blueprint interface where this update physics, let's actually change this to on equip. There we go. And we don't even need this Boolean. This is what we'll call on stuff when we equip it. So if we go in here and we have on equip, we don't even need this, because we're just going to do it all manually. So we want to set simulate physics to none. We want to set collision enabled to query only. I believe we might actually need both. And we'll set collision profile name to block all dynamic. There we go. And I believe that should be good. Now let's go into our handheld manager, and yeah, we're calling the on equip function. So we go in here, press E, we have our banana, drag it into our hotbar, press 1, and there's our sword. Oh, but you see it's blocking, it's pushing me around because we have block all dynamic actually blocks the pawn. So it's pushing me around because the character is of type pawn. So let's do query only, world dynamic. I'm making a new profile, by the way, and I'm going to say on equip, or let's say equipped profile. I'm going to copy that. So we want to block the visibility. We want to ignore the visibility. I'm sorry. Block the visibility, ignore the camera, ignore the pawn. Actually, I think that we just want to overlap with everything and block nothing. Let's try that. And I'm going to go into our melee weapon base, and right here, I'm going to just paste that equipped profile, because I don't think we want to block anything when we're attached to the character. There we go. And now that's good. Okay, now let me try to activate it again, and I unequip it. Look at that. It deletes itself, right? So the only thing we need to do right here is when, oh, I guess that's true. We don't want to remove it from the hotbar. It's still on the hotbar. So I'm interacting with it. I'm getting the banana. I'm putting in the thing. I'm pressing 1, which is the slot it's in. I press 1 again. It unequips itself, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. And I press 1 again, and it equips itself, okay? Now, let's try this with the, what is it? Game item, equipment, melee weapons, greatsword, stone greatsword. There we go. And we will save. And then let's go here. We have, I'm trying to think which one I should pick up first. So, yeah, I can pick up the sword. I'm going to pick up the sword first. I'm going to pick up, or not pick up, but I don't have an item. I don't have an icon for the great sword, but this will do just fine. So if I press 1, if I press 2, it should unequip it. Yeah, that's right. And if I press 2 again, it unequips it. Perfect. But let me actually assign an icon to, so what is it? Item data, handheld. We have our stone greatsword. Let me just get any kind of icon real quick. Icon. There we go, carton. So let's just say, for instance, let's go into our handheld data. And in the stone greatsword, I'm actually going to put this in the left slot. And I'm going to delete the left-hand slot that it blocks. And it should equip both if I do that. Because the left slot should be open, right? The left slot should be open, and it goes in the left slot. So if we do that, and we do that, yeah, it equips both. Perfect. And if I hit 2, it unequips it. That's exactly how it should work, guys. That is perfect. Perfect. All right. In the next episode, we'll continue on this system, and we'll get into the animations, basically. But yeah, that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm hoping to get a better cadence, like a faster cadence with the video uploads. So hopefully early to mid this coming week, the next episode should be out of this series, and we'll get the animations hooked up right. I'll probably download some animations from Mixamo and link them in the description, and we'll go from there, just setting all of it up. And then the next episode, we'll probably have a branch off to a damage system, to where it's like a universal damage system, and that we can call from anywhere, you know, trace anything, apply damage or whatever. I'll branch off of the inventory and interaction system series. I'll branch off of that, do 1 or 2 episodes of the universal damage system, and then come back to the interaction and inventory system, and we can start on like chopping down trees, crafting, stuff like that. And so just to clarify, this next episode that's coming out will be of the ultra modular inventory and interaction system. And don't forget, we have that component that we created, the equipment registry component that we need to register with. So we'll take care of that in this coming episode, and we'll get the animations hooked up. And remember, you can use any swords or skeletal meshes that you want, but there should be a link to the Infinity Blade stuff in the description of this video if you need it. Other than that, guys, I hope y'all learned something, and I appreciate y'all for watching. Check you guys later. Thanks.